I didn't do any of them yet. I set aside.
September 18th. First up, attendance area discussion, building block options, North Alexander, Forest View Acres, and Washington Place.
So we've got 3 up there when Kim gets them pulled up. One was North Alexander, one is north section of Grant Wood, and then one is that Washington Place one that is on the boundary between what would be the New Man attendance area and Longfellow. So the request with the North Alexander and the North Grant Wood was to see if we could carve out approximately 100 students. And so the North Alexander one, that's one you got up, that one was pretty straightforward. Some fairly rectangular block there. Streets you might be familiar with. If you look east-west, you see Cross Park Avenue on there, and then you see Highway 6 on the north side, and the demographics connected with that. The North Grant Wood one, if you'll pull that one up, Kim. That was a little more awkward because if you look at the streets here, as you get down Flatiron and Gleason, you start looking east and west there. When we started to move south in here, you all of a sudden get large numbers of kids. So the only way we could keep it at under 100 was to go along the north side of the Wood attendance area. And you see we got 58 kids there, but literally if you're trying to actually do whole streets and you start dropping south, the numbers went from 58 to 1 1/4,
Wow.
150, just because the concentration of kids in this area is so so high. So our goal was to keep it under 100 and some type of geographic rationality to it.
But the way it looks like that this is drawn, it's potential that kids on the same streets would be separated, correct?
I don't think you can see it on here. We tried to do, some of them are streets, we often try to do backyards so that we're not doing the across the street thing unless it's a busy street. If it's a busy street, then we'll go across the street. So, and then if you pull up the Washington Place one, this is a really small group. And just a reminder, this is the group of neighbors that wrote us the letter about, come from this side, sorry. This is the old trolley line. And if you are out there, if you go out there along Court Street, which is down here, you can actually see the greenway. If you go out on Google Maps, there's somebody walking on it.
Yeah.
So I went out here, I drove this, I walked this, I understand. The original decision was to send this group of students, this group of houses, to Man, and the rationale was, if you look at it purely from a roadway standpoint, because this is a dead-end cul-de-sac, the most logical road connection is to come up here. And I explained that to the parents that I met with. They understood that, but they said their kids all walk this way, so their request was they would prefer that their students be routed to Longfellow. You can see the K6, there's only 3 kids in that neighborhood right now.
I mean, I lived in the cul-de-sac of Washington Place for 10 years.
Oh, okay, so you know well.
Know that easement very
Yep.
well. It is like a thoroughfare.
Yeah.
And it is, it's how my
There were
kids
people
walk
walking on it when I was walking on it,
That's
so.
how my kids walk to Longfellow.
Yeah.
Or my
So there's only 3 kids there right now, so that's their request, so I did share with them that I would map that out, or I would give you the letter, which I did, and then you asked for the number of students, so Adam and I pulled this one up.
What are the other 2 people? What was the?
That was the request to look at if we were trying to better balance the numbers at Alexander and Wood, and looking at some of the capacity numbers, and if there was an opportunity to reduce some of the students there, and the request was for about 100 kids, as I recall, Lori, that's what I wrote down on the note.
Yeah, I think it started with the discussion about Lake Ridge being at Longfellow, and if that didn't go to Longfellow, would that open up those seats for another school to have some relief? For example, Grant Wood, we haven't really talked about anything that impacts Grant Wood that I've seen other than this. So it was just an exercise to see what else could go into Longfellow if it wasn't Lake Ridge.
And then, if you go back to the, why can't I get there? There we go. If you drop down just to number 3 on the agenda and click on that. So what Kim and I did, these are all of the attendance area development meetings going back to November. And so Kim did a nice job. If you click on any of those links, it doesn't just take you to the board docs front page, it takes you right to the page. You want to click on one of those and just show them what it looks like. So it'll take you through another window right to that particular segment of the agenda so that you have immediate access to those. The idea was to make sure that you had quick and easy access to everything. Part of the discussion was, I think at the last work session, you'd asked to pull up the, Janet asked me to pull up the slide, and I had to go back to another agenda, find that, pull it up. So hopefully this way everything's just easily accessible
So
for
we're
you.
gonna pop this into every.
We'll put this on every one.
Yeah.
So we'll just update it. We'll make sure we include the agenda items so that people know what they are. Kim and I also talked about as you go back and look at these. Not so much now, but earlier on, there's one that just says maps. So we're going to try to make sure that they have a lot more clarity than that, than just saying maps on there. Yeah, so that not only now, but moving forward, people can access that stuff. And then if you go back to 2, Kim,
No, Today's agenda.
Oh,
I'm like, wait, now I'm
like, not HR again, there we go. We also put the most up-to-date list of meetings, and then we put the slideshow on there too, so again, you don't have to look for that.
And that'll be on in every work session.
Yep, so we will put those 2 items at the bottom of every attendance area development work session.
Is there anything else on the building block pieces before we talk about, because I think we wanted to talk about the outreach agenda?
My only pressure would be to remind you that it's September 18th, which I know it feels like school just started. We've got a regular board meeting next week on the 25th, 2 regular board meetings in October, 1 regular board meeting in November before we hit Thanksgiving. So we have 4 regular board meetings left before Thanksgiving, and then we have 2 regular board meetings afterwards, 1 in November and 1 in December before the end of the calendar year. Amy and I would prefer if we knew which building blocks were going where before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We've talked, Amy did a nice job today working with the elementary principals to say if we're going to move some building blocks around, we'd like to do some open houses, and we like to do it on the same night so that people who are interested in going to visit their new school have the opportunity to do that and connect with principals, teachers, students.
And
At
what
the,
time frame for that?
Well, so we would be preparing a letter, much like we did for any of our transitions that have occurred so far. Lincoln
Yeah.
Longfellow Meeting, I've been recipient of one of those letters. We did have one set population that moved between that May 2016 board decision and the upcoming 1920 decision, which was Thornton Weber. And in addition to what you would have seen on that Longfellow letter around transportation, VASP, voluntary transfers, just notification of the move, we also had a series of kind of transition opportunities that would have included an open house. So there were several things that happened, and when we're talking about the scale of what's about to happen, we talked about what the feasibility is specific to a lot of, for example, down in transportation, for our families so far, we've been able to give them a letter stating whether they're going to be within the 2 miles or outside of the 2 miles. We're not going to be able to do that with this kind of scale, but what we simply can do is say, if you believe now is your new attendance center that you were zoned outside of 2 miles, here's the paperwork that you can use to apply. So we're talking about some different, way different set of scale with this round.
Yeah.
And so it's just thinking about those transition opportunities we want to provide for our families who will be.
So we wanted to get, I can't remember when I got the Longfellow letter, what time of the school
So
year.
I'm hoping that if you guys are making your December decision in November, that we have communication out to the families about all of those things in January sometime. Now, let me tell you what we did for Horn and Weber though, and again, we can't do it to this scale, but by the end of October, those families, those Horn families, received a letter that said your attendance zone is changing. And then we said we'll follow up with a letter that's more specific, those other details, and that was really December. So we're already behind in that kind of timeline, and I don't know that we're going to be providing 2 letters if we're waiting to do communication until January.
it might be just 1.
And just for one quick question, is that the same communication that like families from Old Hoover will be receiving?
this way, I met with the PTO, I believe it's presidents, and I said to her that, given what we've done recently with the Lincoln Longfellow land situation, that I intend to treat that set of parents a lot different. So I envisioned sending them one of 3 letters, given if you don't meet any different changes to where they're zoned, but they're zoned to, gotta get this right, Longfellow, Man, and Lemmy.
Mhm.
So their top of their letter will be talking about a historic year for them, blah, 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 and that your new attendance zone is the specific building, and then get into the detail of those 3 things. So that set of parents would receive something very specific where, right now, I think if we just went with the May of 2016 changes, we have changes happening at every building, whether it's gains, losses, or gains and losses, in all but 4 buildings.
Dang, holy smokes.
That is a huge scale when we're talking about the amount of,
And that
communication.
is the voluntary transfer, should we vote on
So
that?
that is it, right. So when I had Adam look at this again recently and forecast those numbers forward, I made sure that he was using the live-in numbers and no voluntary transfers, just to give me some semblance of what's the FRL change gonna look like, what's the enrollment change going to look like. And that's when I said, okay, let's think about these buildings as we looked around on the maps. Who's gaining, who's losing, who stands to gain and lose, and then we have the who-lose situation.
So, all these building block, all these examples that we've looked at is helpful for setting context and knowing what options we have. I
Mhm.
think the next big thing that, to level set is the voluntary transfer discussion, because if we choose to do that,
Right.
that might change what building block we move or shift or whatever, right? I mean, so
Yep.
that's been kind of the point, is to get some of these pieces out in front of us. So the voluntary transfer work, I think we're gonna see an item this Tuesday.
This Tuesday,
Presentations
yep.
on the
So you'll
administration.
see some historical data on live-ins, and you'll see that chart. You're used to that chart that has the schools on the side and
Yep.
across the top, shows you
Yep.
where kids go to school. So you'll see some historical data on that. And then probably the big one for you will be the numbers for the live-in for 1920, laid out by school, so that we can again look at the demographics for that and recognize where things will be if we simply proceed as is with the 1920 attendance area without moving any of the building blocks. You'll be able to see that. So then, what our hope is,
So let me just make sure, so
Yep.
it's the current 1920 boundaries
with all live-in
with
numbers,
the living numbers.
right?
Okay,
So you'll see that. So that hopefully will give you that baseline.
Yes.
So you can say, okay, given the 1920 boundaries and given live-in numbers, these are what the demographic profiles of each of the schools look like. Now, with some of the available building blocks, do we want to do some change with those to further enhance the changes that are going to take place with the
So-
boundary changes?
so that's very helpful. So we'll see a presentation on the 25th.
Mhm.
Then we'll have another board discussion at the first October meeting.
On the 9th?
And then the goal will be to vote on voluntary transfer by the 23rd. And so that will give us then our baseline, whether we are keeping with voluntary transfer or not.
Right.
Then we can, in earnest, in November, I mean, we're gonna have to dedicate some real time after that second October board meeting, through work sessions and board meetings, to get down to the building blocks.
The good news is,
Confirmation, so you have what you need to
Yeah.
begin communicating with families.
the good news is you'll have those numbers after the meeting next week, so you'll have an idea of which building blocks might look most attractive to help enhance those demographic ratios. And so you may be able to have some of that conversation in parallel through the work sessions in October, so we can have some simultaneous discussions.
I have to say, having been through this, I think that's awfully aggressive to think that between the last meeting in October and the first meeting in November, to get us before Thanksgiving, that we're gonna have a decision on boundaries,
On the building block changes.
on the building block changes. I mean, my personal thought would be, and I'm interested in your thought on this, Steve, would be that we need to do this in tandem with the voluntary transfer. I know we need to vote on it, but if we put it off until after we voted, that gives us one meeting.
I think though, I mean, I'm new to this and I'll defer to those who've been through this in more rigor than I have experience. my conjecture is that the voluntary transfer discussion is gonna require a lot of discussion, and a lot of families commenting and coming to work sessions and wanting to community comment and stuff. I mean, I feel like that's gonna be a pretty big deal in and of itself. I don't know, I agree with you, the timelines are aggressive, I don't know, I feel like the voluntary transfer is gonna suck up a lot of time and energy, rightfully so, so that we might not have a lot of time in tandem to do the building block kind of tweaking, I don't know.
I think it'll take up a lot of time. I think you're absolutely right. I think it'll take a lot of time at our board meetings for sure, because I think we'll have the community comment plus the presentation, community comment plus board discussion, and then community comment plus probably some additional discussion that 23rd if there's a vote. So I think that you're right in looking at it and saying there will be a lot of time consumed at the board meetings, where the opportunity might be for us is to look at our work sessions on the 2nd and on the 14th.
Yeah.
And if we could,
Aren't one of those work sessions, aren't we starting though, an ed committee?
oh yeah, there's an ed committee on
I
the
don't know,
14th,
it's
14th,
16th, isn't
Or
or
whatever.
16th.
Whatever the
16th.
third
Yeah.
Tuesday is.
Yeah,
And
first
we've
one's
been
P
known
and,
to do work sessions following Ed Committee before, so
Yeah.
it makes for a long night, but we've done it.
and P and G, in all honesty, if we needed to. When we look at sense of urgency, I would put P and G off and put the work session in, and just recognize we're gonna have to roll up our sleeves on P and G after the calendar
Yeah.
year. I think we can do that. I think if there's an opportunity for us, say on the 2nd, is it the 2nd or the 4th, whatever that first one is.
The second is the P, was PD.
Yeah,
Right,
if on
right.
that one, if you could look at, as a board, if you could look at all the building blocks and say, out of all the building blocks that we've looked at, these are the 3, 4, 5 that
These
we're
are the
really
baseline
interested in.
voluntary transfer.
Yeah, these are the ones that we're really most interested in. I think that would really help. Because I think then, like Lori says, I think what's gonna happen is as soon as those building blocks are clearly identified and the public is aware that you're looking at keeping Breckenridge at Lemmy, for instance, and moving the Lemmy, that northeast corner to Hoover, well, then you're gonna get, those parents are gonna wanna come and talk to you. And so I think then that gives you some space.
So on the 25th, they're gonna see, next week, they're gonna see those women numbers?
Yep.
Okay, so even that night, they could say, hey, we haven't really, we're seeing this in those numbers, we haven't thought about this particular neighborhood. They even at that night could ask, and we could be ready by the 2nd to have
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we've exhausted all that we just wanna look at, but,
So to have the final building blocks due by October 2nd?
no, I'm just saying, maybe that chart then will cause you to think of, oh
Are
my
there
gosh, we
other
gotta
building
provide
blocks?
relief here, or we gotta go back and add here, or.
Yeah,
Other building blocks that we
Mhm.
haven't looked at yet.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to kind of pare down all the ones that we looked at,
Yeah,
maybe as we go, because let's say we vote for voluntary transfers, then we're still gonna be doing maybe some boundary work, and say we go against voluntary transfers, we still want to probably do
Sure.
some boundary work, so, and a lot of those are the same
Mhm.
ones that we're looking at now,
Yeah.
regardless, so I think if we can kind of move those forward, like, some of these may or may not make sense either way, some of them we may be more interested in.
Okay. So are we willing to say then we're gonna forego P and G on the 2nd?
I think we
And just
have
make
to-
that call and make that a work session for attendance area?
Yeah. I mean, if we're gonna, be ready to meet the timeline that Amy will need to communicate effectively with parents, I think
Yeah.
there's not a choice.
And I'd even propose, I know we do meetings after ed committee, but I mean, when we get to a certain level of fatigue, I'm sorry to speak for myself, because I get up at
No, you're
4:30 in the
right.
morning, I can't, my eyes are low when it comes to the boundary stuff, just saying.
Yep.
So if we want to really focus and prioritize, I think we need to focus and prioritize. I think we were gonna be at West, right, ed committee for athletics, can we?
Did we figure out a location?
West side,
West?
that's what the-
Yeah.
But I think we would take it off the table and focus on this, and carve out, make sure we have plenty of time to do this well, in the time that we need to hit deadline wise. Yeah?
So, that'll be October 2nd, and that's.
Our October dates are 2,
Right. But we
and-
can't have it here, right?
no, because it's
No,
election,
it's
we'd be at
election.
Southeast. And just so that you're aware, we're fortunate that October is a 5 Tuesday month,
Oh, yay!
so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we've got an extra Tuesday.
We have the 30th also,
We're gonna need it.
so
That's
we,
good.
we have an extra Tuesday available to us.
Everything's falling in place.
But it would be November 13th when you would like us to vote
Ideally,
on final boundaries.
ideally, 27th would be a fallback. I'm far enough away from Amy, I can offer that up as an option.
But ideally, the 13th.
13th,
We
yes.
should target that.
Yeah.
We should
Before.
target that.
5, I guess it's
I'm
5
just-
meetings, 6 meetings.
I'm just
We can do
itching to
it.
get
Now and
these.
then.
If we focus and pare everything else out and put
Mhm.
our energy and priority on this, we've got a ton of data out there. We've been talking about this, we've got lots of kind of foundational context.
I'm wondering, it would be helpful for my brain, and maybe you guys will say, oh, no, it's already fairly represented, but once we bring those building blocks back, to have them, I don't even know, labeled as such, where like, where they currently are at versus where we think they might go, I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be just, there's so many of them, and I don't know.
Some way
that-
to organize it in
Yeah.
a
But
way.
you've done some of that, like,
We have, and Adam and I actually talked about it, and I think we can represent it, especially if the, let's use, I keep using it, but I mean, if we look at, like, say, Breckenridge and that Lemmy East block, there's only one place it's going, so we don't have to have lots of different scenarios, like it goes here, it goes there, it goes somewhere else. So then what we can do is we can say, here is the Breckenridge building block, it would go here, here's the Lemmy East building block, it would go here, and we can give you another set of numbers post moving all of the blocks that you're looking at. So you can get here's what it looks like in 1920 with live-in numbers. Here are the building blocks that we're looking at and the individual demographics in each building block. And here's that same big chart with all those building blocks moved, so you can see what's the heavy lift and where do we get to in the end.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you had, as much as you hate to redo your work, you're going to have to, because even just in the month's time
Oh, yeah.
since August 28th to today, moving Lake Ridge out of Alexander had a 9% difference in FRL
Yeah,
than what it did
and part of that,
3 weeks ago.
this is farther into the weeds than you want to get, but from Power School, we roll up students, and then we go through the process of e-registration to make sure that all the kids register, and we leave a lot of kids in the system as we're waiting to make sure that they haven't left and gone somewhere else, and then we get to drop dead dates where the schools, if they haven't seen the kid yet this year, then we start pulling them out of the system, and so that's why, especially at the start of the
Okay.
school year, you see
So
some of
maybe
those big
that's a bigger
changes.
jump than we would ever see.
Yeah, I don't think
any
you'll
other
see that
timeframe.
much jump moving forward, 2, 3, 4 weeks type of thing. But because we did some of those building blocks earlier in the year, when we finally give you that building block again here in a couple weeks, it might look different than it did when we first gave it to you, because that might have been in a late August, early September pull before we started withdrawing the students that are no longer with us.
And to compare the apples to apples.
Right,
you
we'd
know,
wanna-
One example would be Kirkwood going to Borlaug versus Kirkwood going to
Mhm.
Wickham. Kirkwood stays the same either way.
Right.
But what do those two look like?
And Adam and I talked about it. Once we know what those building blocks are going to look like, we're going to do the poll on the same day, so that you've got a slice in time of data.
Yeah, so then you need to know what building blocks we want to explore.
Within the next couple meetings, yes.
Okay, so diverting just a bit from the equity discussion, thinking about capacity, you guys have talked about Horn and Borlaug, having there be a larger population at Borlaug than you expected, and Horn now we move students out. Is that something that we need to look at?
I think, yeah, Adam, actually, after he ran those numbers for me, very recent, just for me to prepare for how many buildings we're actually having changes. That is exactly what he wanted to do next, is for capacity there, and then as we think out, some of those buildings haven't had their FMP changes yet either, so what's that going to look like? There's Steve and I and Adam on
Yep.
email talking about that.
We're going to add a capacity column for today, so you can see what that looks like, a
Mhm.
capacity column for 1920, so you know what that looks like, so that you might look at it and say, ooh, shortage here of seats, excess seats here.
what do you
Might there be a
use for
building block
capacity?
that we haven't?
How are you gonna use, like, what are you gonna?
We're gonna give you the 1920, we had this debate, how many capacity numbers do you want to give you? The answer was not very many, because we don't want to be too confusing, so we were gonna look at what is the capacity in 1920 when we move in there. We're also looking at Amy and Adam and I are looking at end of FMP capacity too, so we know what that looks like for
Yeah, I think
projects
we
that
need
are
to
gonna.
project out some.
But the
There's no
capacity-
online.
In a building depends on if we're using RAM or
Yeah.
not, right? So
Yeah.
are we getting
Yeah.
like non-RAM numbers? What, you know what I'm saying? So like a 20 number is different with a RAM than it is without.
He actually doesn't use RAM when he does capacity. He does it based on K3, or, K3, 4, 6, no, K2, 4, 6, pre-K. So those each have a different number, but actually doesn't use RAM itself for capacity. So the presumption is that the capacity number would hold either a RAM 3, 2, or 1 class in there. The issue that Amy and I have is the capacity of the building measured by our largest number won't hold that many RAM classes, hence the portables at Alexander and the end of the classroom, or end of the hallway classrooms that we built at Alexander. So we don't actually assign a RAM capacity to the building in the capacity modeling process.
So having the capacity numbers would be good, but it would be hard. I mean, it's not a.
It's not a fail-safe, no.
So could you identify for us which hotspots we need to be looking at? So that's one. If there's others, maybe tell us, and maybe along with that, a recommendation for a building block?
Okay. I could think what off the top of my head, you guys just brought that building block up, being over 100 students, they're coming up next to the FNP, but their FRLs that are missing, I think it'll be really good for you to see the data next week.
Are there other building blocks that we should be looking at? I know Lucas is above 50%. Is there anything
That's gonna drop.
Yeah,
Gonna
maybe
drop
a little
that's
bit.
going to drop? Okay, 2019. I'll look at the list here.
Dwayne's enrollment is going to drop quite significantly. I know we have space issues there. I don't know that it needs to drop as significant as it's dropping. Again, with the live-in numbers, that's what we're looking at. I write my list.
Yeah, Lucas sits at 50, which, our goal is to be 50 or less. But Wood is the big hot spot that we haven't talked about at all. And Hills. I know that's a tough one. And then also Kirkwood, are there other solutions there? Because with the numbers that you gave us tonight, with Boston Way, that only takes Kirkwood down to 72%, which is significantly different from our goal of 50%.
Could we look at any populations that could move into Kirkwood as opposed to moving?
We can do that. I think probably what I need to do is I need to sit down with Amy and Adam and get the software up and take a look at it, because some of those are hard to see unless you can actually see where the kids live.
And so, and I'm just going to say, because there's dominoes with all of this, as you see them fall, feel free to go ahead and provide the next building block. For example, with Kirkwood, the most logical population to move into Kirkwood is an area that's currently going to Corval Central. If you take them out of Corval Central's FRL skyrockets. So then we would need to think of an area perhaps from Wickham that would go then to Corval Central. So where you see those changes impacting another school. And I'm just saying these things because we're short on time. We don't have time to come to each meeting and say, can you identify, or can you do this now? And 2 weeks later, give us the information.
And I'm also wondering too, just the scope of how far we want to go with this first round of building block changes. Clearly we're trying to make a significant swing around getting more equity in our schools. There's no question, but I'm also mindful of what you just described in terms of all the communication and the busing and that bringing families along. And I at some point, I think we need to, as a board, say this is as far as we can go in this time frame, and settle and do it well, and then pick it up for the out years, in 2020, and then pairing comes back into play and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, I guess I was kind of waiting for we had magnets on here, but, you know, we talked about pairing, maybe only one pairing. We only get to one pairing this time, and some attendance area changes, and then we look, you know, at the next step, maybe a magnet would make sense at Grant Wood, and that's how we address Grant Wood, or that's how we address Hills, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So it may not happen right away, but it's
This is gonna take many years, I think, probably, very intentional to get to that final. I feel like just given how impactful the changes are and to do it well. But we're all agreed, right? You said pairing, Paul, in kind of the first way, we all were very clear that pairing is not up for 1920.
right.
Right, okay, that's
Yeah.
for,
I'm saying like that's like 1920, there may be some attendance zone changes.
Yes.
2020, there could be a pair.
pairing.
2021, there
might
may
be a magnet,
Yeah,
yeah,
there may be a new school, or who knows.
yeah, yeah.
What Matt forecasted for me last week still has 5 of our buildings sitting right at or above 70%.
But that's just, just now.
No, for
For the
forecast for the
2019
1920.
Yeah, with the
Like
1920 boundaries.
Right,
Yeah.
Libbins, yeah.
But with one or two changes, and then
Yep.
changes in a couple of schools.
And then my question would be, along with the highs, what are the lows? Because as far as I see it, both issues are at
Yep.
play.
Totally agree, yeah.
If we're sitting at several that are, you know, under 20%, do we need to look at that?
Well, when Hoover closes, that eliminates one. When Hoover closes, that eliminates one.
Oh, sure, yeah,
They were only at 17.
sure,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Whip count would show 6 at 20 or below.
And two, well, Lincoln would change because of the boundaries.
Lincoln and Manor are going to pretty much flip
Yeah.
flop.
And some of those, the North Liberty ones we've already dealt with, so that's going to take a couple of, possibly 2 off the table there, 3 maybe.
We don't have
Okay.
not to look at them at all.
But there are others that I think, in my opinion, we should be looking at the lows just as much as we're looking at the highs.
So that's the topic for the second work session, is to have the move-in data in front of us. This data comes forward next Tuesday, and we sit down and we have that organization of the building blocks we've looked at today with the capacity. We have that presentation, organizational piece can be there. Then we can sort of methodically work our way through based on the baseline of move-ins. Where do we want to start making some priority looks around the building block shifts? And by the end of that session on the second, I think we have to plan to, like, offering food, whatever. We should seriously be ready to spend some real time on that and make some progress that night, don't you think?
Could you come to us with your additional, not recommended, but additional building blocks for discussion by that October 2nd? Does that give you enough time?
Probably. Yeah, we can certainly shoot for that as a goal, yeah.
Okay. It's helpful, getting grounded in the timeline. Is there anything else we need to cover on that topic? I think we've got our next steps pretty well defined. All right, hearing none, we're moving to, like, there was a lump back in. Okay, back to, our outreach agenda. Are there things that we need to add? When we talked about starting to connect with PTOs, for example, we've got, we've been invited to the Longfellow one.
University of Iowa Black faculty and something else council reached out to me today and asked if I would be willing to come to their next meeting to do a presentation, so I can get the official name of the group that I agreed to go talk to, and that's October 26th. Because they've been reading articles and they
Sure.
want to see how they can be supportive. But yes, PTOs are definitely wanting
Yeah, Longfellow, obviously, Hoover has been interested in us coming.
Lucas has reached out just because the stories that are printed still show, I think, or in one of our early meetings, there was a discussion on possible pairings and somehow or another, I don't know, but one of the documents.
Yep, Lucas and Wood.
And so they would just like to have some face-to-face time to see if that's really going to happen.
I covered Lemmies with Lemmy PTA since I'm a member there.
Mhm.
And their next meeting is not till November, but we've talked about it at every PTA
I'm
meeting.
sorry, what?
Lemmy.
Oh,
I covered
yeah.
it, Lemmy. We've talked about it there.
So for those schools that have reached out to us, we should get on their next regular agenda. And so for Lucas, do we know when they meet next?
Yes, they meet, because they just met the 10th, and they meet the second Monday of the month, so it'll be the 8th. Wait, is the 8th a real school day? It says it's Columbus Day. Did we celebrate that in this year?
No, you're not.
Oh, good.
But I do believe that the
That's-
8th is
It's a day
a,
off.
Yeah,
the 5th and the
The
8th.
5th and the 8th, there's no school.
It's a what?
The 5th and the
there's
8th.
no
Teacher workdays.
Okay, so then I'll reach out to find out when the next
Yeah.
day is.
Okay. And we're scheduled at Longfellow,
On,
the 10th of October?
yeah, I think
Is it
it's
the 10th or the 9th?
Huh? I think it was-
9th? Is it the 9th or the 10th?
I think it's the
I
10th.
think
It's not,
10th.
it's
It
not a
can't be
school
the
board
9th
meeting.
Because we have school board.
Are you guys worried at all about your capacity to get out to 20 different PTAs?
We're not gonna be able to do all 20, I don't think, especially in this time frame that we're
I
talking
think we're
about,
gonna
this
have to
initial wave of decision making. And so, I mean, that was also kind of going back, and I was thinking, are there certain schools that we should be prioritizing? And clearly the ones that have been in the pairing discussion so far, to bring them into the conversation more directly, I think is important. But then as we get clearer on the building blocks under consideration, I think those impacted schools would rise to the top of our list for outreach, right?
The other thing I was thinking about was, would you ever want to go to, and I don't know then if you get the turnout, if we want to go to each of our junior high buildings and just have those feeder.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Longfellow's PTA meeting is October 2nd.
It's October 2nd. Why was I thinking it was the 10th?
That won't work
No.
for us.
The PTA meetings, at least on my side of town, are during the day. Not conducive to a lot of parental involvement, works for a few, not lots. So if, I guess my thought would be if we're going to do that, we should open it up, make it a bigger meeting, not just a PTA meeting.
You mean go to like a
Just
central
go to,
division?
like the board has done in the past, we've had the community sessions at the junior highs, because they're centrally located.
I feel like we should have a little bit more solid picture of what we're doing for 1920 before we have,
Yeah.
it's my gut, I could be wrong.
I mean, we will have probably a more solid plan, at least when it comes to the voluntary transfer issues
Yeah.
and tweaking of boundaries. So we could possibly do a couple of these in December, maybe?
It would be after a vote.
I know, I was thinking of trying to do something in,
I mean,
in November, in the October, maybe
So we're
early November
going
timeframe, before we vote on all the
Before we
final.
vote, okay.
That's what I was thinking too, just to get the input.
One thing I'm being reminded of, I don't know if I bring this up, is just when that work, and Lori and Billy are here for this, when that work was being done in May of 2016, and then that one change occurred for Horn to Weber, and then those families feeling like it just came out of nowhere to them, and so what can we do, what can we all attuned to what's happening at the board table.
But lots of people don't pay attention, most people don't pay attention, so.
Once we start having these meetings,
I mean, I
they'll
just
be
think
paying
They'll be
attention.
clued in.
the schools that we're, after the next couple of meetings, we should really know schools that are
Yeah.
gonna be affected, and just a communication, I think, out to the principals that can send it out, you know, we can just let them, like, hey, this is on the table for the board, they're
And we're
talking
having
about
a
it.
session on these days, please
For you to
come.
and share your thoughts and.
You guys just give us the green light. When, where you think that's
This is where we
appropriate.
have to make a lot of progress in a second. I'll ask Laney to reschedule the long road PTA.
On the second, voting day, and it's board meeting, that's a bad day.
So I'll reach out and ask her to reschedule that, just because we would be, and we really want to be there, we really, I'll do that, but not tonight, first one in the morning.
Could we shoot for the end of October for the community meetings
We would have to.
before a vote,
Yeah.
so that people don't feel like we're just going through the motions with no purpose of them listening to what they have to say?
Yeah, I think we need to.
And just knowing how these things work, how they pick up speed, I think, Amy, tell me what you think, is a month prior to the vote the right time frame, or is that too little amount of time frame for folks to have input?
It's better than them finding out afterwards.
And that means we would have to shoot for, I mean, if we're trying to vote by the 13th of November, a month back would be about the week of the 15th. So we would have to have a good sense of digesting information from the second, I'm sorry, the 25th and the 2nd in order to get those scheduled. Yeah, roughly 4 weeks.
I think we, on the second, I don't mean to pile too much onto that work session, but we look at what, we have the foundational data from the LINs, we look at what building blocks we think are gonna make the most sense, to apply on that foundational living view. And that is what we then use to form where we wanna have these community meetings. You know, maybe we wanna do some PTOs, maybe we wanna do some broader ones, I mean, I don't know, at this point, without having a little bit more clarity on the potentially impacted schools, I'm having a hard time saying, let's just schedule some open meetings. I feel like we need to have a little bit more targeted understanding of where we're going so that we can target a communication plan and then outreach plan more specifically.
My only thing I would say is, there are folks, including myself, who do our work schedules way far in advance, and if a meeting is scheduled 2 weeks ahead of time, we might not be able to make it. And in this case, I'm not talking about myself, but there are people that won't be able to participate with that short a notice.
So we have a meeting the week of the 15th, we have a meeting the week of the 22nd, we have a meeting, I'm just, I mean, I'm thinking out loud. I'm worried about scheduling meetings now and then realizing after the second we have more information in front of us that we have to change stuff. I don't know. So I'm open to suggestions. If we want to try to start scheduling meetings now, where would we want to do them? How do we want to communicate them? Is it, you know, do we do one at every junior high? Do we, I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
I mean, at this point, not knowing truly what the buildings will be, I think we would have to go with every junior high in order to invite all feeder schools, because chances are you may be impacted.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer more of a targeted
I know,
approach, but
but-
it's, but I.
What typically happens is the same people go to the meetings
Right.
on all, and, no matter where they are in town. So if
Exactly.
we have 3 meetings a week apart, we'll have the same group of people and more.
Do we need one in North Liberty though? I mean, just thinking out loud, if the school that's impacted the most, that's a feeder school to North Central is Kirkwood, and having one at Northwest is closer anyway for them to go to. And we've already kind of decided the North Liberty boundaries with the new school opening, so I don't know if anything we decide And these discussions wouldn't necessarily affect anybody not part of it.
So just do a southeast,
Southeast,
northwest. Yeah, that makes some sense. And, you know, yeah, that would work.
And honestly, if we had to, we could divide and conquer that if they had to be on the same. We had one meeting, we had half and half. It's just, I'm just saying it's
Well-
possible. If we have to, is what I'm saying.
What Amy has talked about, I remember very clearly.
Yeah.
The accusation of not being inclusive of people's thoughts and not giving them an opportunity to participate.
No, that's not including them. That's how you
Not
say it.
including them,
No.
not giving enough time,
Right.
kind of pulling it out at the last minute
But
and
also-
voting on it.
Well, and that I totally agree with, but then we put out these general meetings and we aren't saying specifically what we're talking about. And so people don't see their neighborhood listed on the meeting
Yeah.
agenda, they're like, oh, it doesn't apply to me. And all of a sudden, on October 2nd, we decide it applies to them. Do you know what I mean? That's why I
Mhm.
feel that we need to have more concrete information before we advertise where these sessions are gonna occur. And who are we talking about? So family, so we can talk to the principals and say, you know, get this letter out to your students, send it home in their backpacks, whatever. Because if people don't see themselves represented in the meeting invitation, they're busy, they're doing a million other things, we don't have to go.
My experience with these meetings, that people go, they go, but it's the same people that go, because they have been through this multiple times and they've seen how it's unfolded multiple times. So,
It's too important that to get right. If we have to back from that from the middle of November and we're saying a month would be great, that's the middle of October, and that puts like a lot of pressure in a short amount of time too. You might get it right.
And I hear what you're saying, Lori, that the same people come, but don't we want to target people that usually don't come?
oh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
but
So,
we need to
I mean,
do it too.
But we,
Yeah.
it may, I think it goes to that we may not be able to target those people if they don't realize this is about you. It's not just a general meeting to talk about boundaries and changes, but this is for subdivision X that, and I think we're gonna have that problem. I think we're gonna have that problem because we don't have all the information tonight. Even scheduling a meeting, people will put it on their calendars, but probably not the right, I mean, everybody in the district are the right people, but the families that this will impact the most and usually don't come are
If the
ones
Breckenridge
that-
families don't know that you're talking about them, they're not coming to these meetings.
Right.
And so we'll get the folks that go to all the meetings, they'll be there, but they may not be impacted directly by the proposed changes. So,
Stop that.
I don't know.
I think it's
so-
fine line, I mean, it's a fine line. I just would hate for somebody to say, you told me a week before the meeting that you're having a meeting, and you're telling me it impacts me and I'm supposed to make it work. And I
Then
work
if we
shift
told them
work.
3
and
weeks
it's bad.
before and we didn't tell them they were being impacted, they weren't gonna go to it in the first place. I mean, this is, I'm not totally convinced. And so I would prefer to have more concrete information of who we're talking about, impacted schools and families, in districts, neighborhoods, and be able to provide as many opportunities as we possibly can, maybe maybe multiple meetings, maybe, maybe eating into that month time frame, leading up to the November board vote on the 13th. It may not be ideal, but my personal opinion is we're gonna get more and better attendance when we have specific information of who's impacted. And we wait, after the 2nd, we spend some time on that agenda to figure out when we want these meetings to happen. We get them scheduled ASAP, we get the messaging out, and we need to schedule, as I said, multiples.
Well, and, keep in mind, one of the things that I was just reflecting on as I was thinking about the conversation tonight, one of the things that Paul shared is that you may hone that list of building blocks down to a relatively small number. If you have a
Right.
relatively small number, we can be very targeted.
Yeah.
We can work with the principals to
Yeah.
make sure that we are inviting the people that live in those neighborhoods. We can communicate directly with them to make sure that they know this is about you.
Yeah. That's my
And
preference.
keeping in mind that it affects everyone, even
Right.
if you don't live in that neighborhood and it's a part of your
Mhm.
school, it still impacts the school.
Sure.
I can remember in 2010, it didn't impact my neighborhood, but boy, my neighborhood was there because it impacted
Sure.
the street over.
Yep.
So
I think he's not,
it's more than just the building blocks.
I think he was just being more like, we'll be very targeted, very specific on making sure we target those neighborhoods and also having a general.
Yeah, but I would think, like, I mean, we've been using that Lemmy example, if you're gonna make that change with Breckenridge and that east block of Lemmy, you'd invite all the folks from New Hoover and all the folks from Lemmy, because it's gonna affect both of those schools, but you might reach out directly to the Breckenridge neighborhood and the East Lemmy neighborhood, so that they know, yes, it's gonna impact the total, entire school, but your kids may move or stay, depending on what the plan was.
So if we decide on the second where we want to have these meetings, then we can schedule meetings the week of the 22nd, I know it's Thanksgiving week, or the week of the 29th after Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong month.
Halloween.
The 22nd or the week, and that's 3 or 4 weeks after we decide. I mean, that gives people time to get it on the calendars. I know it's only a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks before the board meeting to vote, but we could certainly schedule a work session on the 30th to get input
Yeah.
and to discuss input that we got from meetings the week of the 22nd, so that it's not just, speak and not have any, real discussion around the inputs. We have an opportunity for a work session on the 6th, leading up to the vote on the 13th. I mean, so if we were to target meetings the week of the 22nd, then that gives us 2 work session weeks to continue to get input, or, invite people to work sessions to provide or continue discussion. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, you guys, but I think 3 weeks is enough time to get a meeting and advertise it and get it and allow people to. Yeah? Sure. Go for that, go for getting clarity on the second, and then do our level best to get robust community sessions organized with that targeted information, and shoot for the week of the 15th, the week of the 22nd, maybe we do one each of those weeks, and then we've got 2 work sessions, the 30th and the 16th, that we need to continue to invite community members in and to discuss the inputs before the vote. Fair enough? Okay. What else do we need to cover on the outreach agenda? Those ones are big. Those outreach items are gonna be priority, the ones we just discussed. All right, next item, this next one is just really the data, the historical data,
Right.
right, that we're gonna have in all these sessions, so there's really nothing to discuss there, I don't think. And then moving into committee assignments. I need to pull up the sheet. Are you doing that, Kim? Thanks. When I was out there in the Google Doc yesterday, a number of folks have gone out and filled in some things. I haven't looked today.
Because I had to look to realize what one was.
Operations is here? Where's that?
Yeah, it's on this is on the print.
It's not on the Google Docs,
Operations is in there?
no.
Oh,
And I think the conversation, because we talked about this Monday. I think
We
the
did.
Conversation with operations is a lot of that. work
We've
is
moved
being-
most of that into work session, so we've just had it as committee of the whole. So it's functioned like the ed committee, but rather than trying to schedule a committee meeting, because we've struggled with those committee meetings, we just started putting those items right into the work sessions or into the board meetings themselves, so that we didn't wind up waiting months and months and months to deal with them.
And we've got committees or task forces on safety, playground. Those are 2 of kind of the hot topics for operations committee. I mean, I was on that committee, Phil, you were on it. I think we met twice last year, maybe.
Yeah, we should have met more, but yeah, I've been on operations since I got on the board.
But what was happening was that it kept getting deprioritized
Yeah.
under other things.
So the thought is to bring operations just into work sessions and.
Or board meetings
and I'll-
themselves, yeah.
I'll let process.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with that with the committees, the task forces that we have going for now.
We could do that with policy and governance too.
We talked about that too, yeah.
I mean, and I think there's been times, I know at times we've even talked about you have you have all the committees and have the board there and
Right.
and everyone's essentially in every one.
Policy and ed could really work the same way too, just in the sense that, tonight's a perfect example. So we're working on something that is of great weight, and now we look at it and say, well, let's push this committee meeting off, which means then we push the topic off, sometimes for months. And that's, I know for you as board members, that's frustrating. So if rather than trying to park them in committees that we struggle to find Tuesdays where they can meet, if rather than doing that, we look at it and say, is that a presentation, is that discussion, is that an action item? Let's get that on a front of the front of the table agenda, or is it something that we need to bring people in? We need feedback from teachers or support staff or whoever. Well, let's put that back here. And then maybe we might have to wait 2 weeks for it, but we're not going to have to wait 2 months for it.
Yeah.
So that might be something to think about.
Yeah, I like that idea, and the great thing about committees is, like you say, being able to bring other people into the conversation,
We can do that.
which, if it's in that work setting.
We can do it right here.
And it's.
Just like last week.
It's understood,
Yep.
that's gonna be an ongoing policy. Yeah, I would be interested in looking at that,
But just as an example, I know that athletics is something that we would like to talk about. We had hoped, we were kind of thinking about doing it in September with Ed Committee. That didn't work. Then we're going to do it in October, and we just collectively agreed that's not going to work. I hesitate to say there's going to be a Tuesday available in November.
Right.
Now we're into December with it.
Yeah.
That just seems like a long time to wait for it.
Yeah.
And you may look at it and say, hey, we need more than the 6 slides we're going to get at the front there, and we'd like to be able to talk to coaches or the ADs or whoever you want to talk to. Let's do it back here at a work session, but just that item. So lots of times with our committees, we have 2 or 3 agenda items. We're just going to do that one. We can put it in a work session. Then you don't have to wait for it. You may have to push some other things off that you were going to do in that agenda, but at least that one, if that's the one of most importance, you can get to it. So that might be something to think about.
Well, and I thought, last work session, we had, a lot of this stuff was on that, but
Mhm.
the first discussion
Right.
was fruitful, was very good.
Yep.
We didn't want to cut it, we didn't want to
Right.
have it time sensitive.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that that's something we can work with and make work if we do it that way. And if something gets slid back and we realize, hey, this needs to come up, we just,
If-
you prioritize, bring it up.
And if at some point in the future, all your Tuesday meetings are unoccupied with board meetings or work sessions, then you would have the opportunity to reconstitute those committees and go back to work.
There's opportunity.
So are we saying that we're going to do that with P and G then too? Because we a minute ago, we just said we're going to basically postpone P and G till after the new year.
I mean, that's fine, but typically, will we then sit as a board and work through language and that, because P&G, and that's the thought that I'm having, will
Yeah.
come and present,
Now, the one thing that's a little different about P&G than perhaps with Ed and Ops is we rarely have guests there. I mean, I think
Right.
about our Ed Committee meetings, right?
Yeah.
it's more.
P&G tends to work really quickly when it's working well. You've got Joe in here going through stuff or whatever it is, and I hesitate to ask this for the committee members, but if there would be a willingness for people who are on P&G to say, we're going to meet at 5, and we're going to work quickly from 5 to 6, and then we're going to go into the work session after that. I know that makes, to your point earlier, that makes for a long night, and I understand that, and it's a big ask.
Yeah, I don't
But-
count on.
Jen is just alternative.
But you could then stack.
Alternate, I can't talk.
It's tough, it'd be impossible to stack, well, you could, but you'd be here
Yeah.
forever, to stack Ed or stack Ops, because those things tend to take a lot longer than P&G does, but you could stack P&G, and we've done that frequently in the past, where we've stacked it in front of something else, a work session, an Ed Committee meeting, So we could stack P and G if you wanted to try to keep it that separate, if it would work to come in at 5.
I sort of feel like the PG, given the governance model change that we're wanting to contemplate.
A lot of that work will go away, yeah.
But I almost feel like at some point having a work session item on what the scope is, what we're trying to accomplish, how we're gonna do the work, and then that gives kind of the runway
You'll
for the
probably have-
committee to
yep.
go off and start
Yep.
carving out work and focusing on it.
You'll probably need Joe to sit in and say, here's the skeleton of what things look like, am I moving in the right direction? And that likely would be a group of the whole, which could
Yeah.
take place at a work session,
Yeah.
so that there's some conversation there. But then some of that work might be farmed out to P and G in
And we
small
can say,
bites.
Okay, full board understands what
Yep.
we're doing and why, and agree to the direction,
Yep.
so carve out 2 pieces, committee, come back and report or something.
So like I said, I know that's a big ask. I know I've got Ruthina, Paul, and Sean, who's not here, so we can just volunteer him. So I know that's a big ask to say, can we start at 5 when we meet?
Right?
I'm free at 3, so whatever.
Okay,
School board might not get off at 4.
okay.
So wouldn't it be, I think it'd be great if we could ask Joe to come to our December meeting, our work session in December. And what does this look like? What's the framework?
Sure.
And, because I know our attention is on the attendance area up until November.
Can I just ask about when you're done?
I'm done.
So we are not doing the education committee in October? And I don't care what the topic is, but.
Oh, I don't know. I was,
Okay.
I
Kinda
thought
that's what
I
you're
had
saying.
heard that. I made a note, which may be an assumption on my part, because I was
We might
making,
need to repurpose that time.
I just would hate for whatever the topic is for education committee meetings to get pushed because we actually talk about stuff
In the schools,
Mhm.
yeah. I'm just trying to, well, I suggested it because of potential meeting the time to further our work on the attendance series.
But the education committee meetings generally start at 4:30.
they do, but I know one of the concerns was if we start at 4:30 and run a full ed committee meeting and we're not done until 6:30, and then we're trying to stack a work session on top of that,
That was also a concern.
there was a concern about trying to
I
do that.
guess.
So,
Personally, if we're done at 6:30, that's like a half-hour board meeting now.
So we could do that, if we start at 4:30,
Mhm.
meaning if we need the work session time, we can use it, I mean, I hear ya. So
What date is
right on
that?
time.
The 16th?
And that's at West,
it is.
so we'll do obviously our work session
We can go right into the work session there, so we're not driving back, yeah.
Yeah.
We're using library there, Kim?
No, the east side of the cafeteria.
Okay, all right.
What's the date on that again?
16th,
16th of
Yeah.
October,
yes.
Can we try to-
4:30. West ICAP. And we'll have the ed committee and then go into work session after.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, we've gotten through one line of your assignments here.
All right, so so ed committee we talked about, that's committee of the whole, PG, we discussed having a topic at work session, but then once we're all clear on the direction and the scope, having the committee go through the receipts and report back to us, and I think we're okay with the membership there. Financial committee, that's staying the same?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Ruthina, we voted on as our ISD delegate, thank you. So we have a whole bunch of volunteers for the Iowa City Assessors Conference Board.
I think it's just the three of us, right, Bill? Just me, you, and Ruthina that are even qualified for this.
Yeah,
I'm an alternate.
So when you mean qualified, I don't even.
And-
I don't
and
even
that-
know.
and that
Yeah,
is
it's
only like 2 meetings and.
And it's really
and-
quick. It's
Yeah.
But I do
Well-
like that you knew there were 3 people and you volunteered to be the alternate, so that looks like you two are on it.
So I guess it's Phil and Paul for both of those.
Not both of them. I mean, that one is. We didn't have it. Did we have it?
Well, what's the Iowa City Assessors Evaluation Committee? Is that the same thing? You have to be a resident of Iowa City?
I think you do.
Well, there's one where you
It's
go
one
to,
time.
Yeah.
there's one meeting with like the city and,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think who else.
Well,
And there needs to be two board members there for the vote to count, and every time I've gone to it, the other person hasn't shown up, and so the vote never counted,
So-
even though I was
No,
there.
the one vote we had the meeting this year, I was on the phone.
So
That's
the,
right, you were on
the
the.
examining board is one that
Should be.
meets very rarely, because that's the one where you pick the assessor. I can't remember who volunteered to do that the last time
Well,
they
that's
picked
only
one.
when they figured it.
Yeah, and they were really irritated because it hadn't met in a long time, because the
Well.
assessor hadn't changed, and all of a
Go
sudden it
back.
changed.
No, it can't be a school board member though, for the assessor's examining board.
Can't be a what?
It has to be somebody in the,
It
it
cannot
can't
be
be
a
a
school board
city,
member.
well, you know, someone in the city, right? It has to be someone in rural Johnson County.
Can't be a school board member.
Oh,
It's
okay.
been, it was Chase before he left, and then I don't think we had anybody on there after Chase left.
Wait,
So it
oh yeah,
sounds like it's gonna be Chase.
Yeah.
Go back to that other committee, it just has to be me and Phil, because I think it meets before, one time,
Mhm.
Yeah.
prior to the conference board meeting, so.
The
that-
evaluator, or the assessor's evaluation committee,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay?
And it sounds like the assessor's examining board is gonna be Chase.
Yeah, we just nominated him. Yay.
No problem with that.
I'll accept on his
And Laura,
behalf.
thank you for the assessors conference board,
I,
whatever that is.
yeah, and I've done JJYD before, and I'm happy to do it again. JP's been doing it. He hasn't signed up for anything, so I didn't want to jump in there before he had an opportunity.
So should we tentative JP? Let's just put him in. He said he's gonna try and be here, he's teaching a class tonight, but we'll probably finish before.
Let's
he
just
gets
put him
here.
in there and he'll tell us if he
Put
can.
an asterisk next to his name, would you, Kim?
Need to confirm. So then-
Yeah.
So then the foundation, and we've got Coalition for Racial Justice. You had put your name in, and I kind of wanted to do that too.
Sure.
And then we've got curriculum review, Sean volunteered for that. So I stuck my name down in negotiations, I just, as a placeholder, because I know last year we had issues with people's conflict of interest.
Mhm.
Sean and I were the only two that could do, so
Right.
Sean and I can duke that one out.
I think you'll win, Sean.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the last time you said you'd be willing to let someone else.
Yeah.
Did he? So
Yeah.
that means
I
it's
think
me.
you wrote
It's
an
not the
email
only
note to that
one.
effect.
Yeah.
All right, so that's me, and then we've got meet and confer, Paul.
And I think JP did equity, and I'm willing to give that up if he wants that. So if you want to stick him,
Yeah, I think, I had wanted to do equity too, but I didn't because I thought JP was
Yeah.
gonna do, so I'm happy to not. And then I thought the health insurance one was interesting, but I am happy if someone else wants to do it.
I've done it for 3 years. I took my name off of it because I'm on the safety committee and I want to be able to spread the
Is there
wealth.
someone else who would like to do insurance?
I can do insurance.
It's a really
You want
good,
to?
That's what I do for a living, so,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
not specifically insurance, but I
it's
talk
the
about it a
first
lot.
Monday of the month at 4 o'clock, just so you know.
First Monday of the month at 4:00.
That meets here.
And I do
Every month?
integrated pest management and
Okay.
playground.
We'll better
So
see
yeah,
what we
change
make.
me from insurance to Lori, and that's Phil,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Phil's the next one too.
And playground too.
I think that takes care of it.
Woohoo!
And we're done.
Does the insurance committee meet year-round, or do they just have a task they do and then they?
Every month.
Every month,
Every
yeah,
month,
but not in the summer.
Right.
No, that's right, they don't meet in the summer.
So we've already had one meeting that I went to this year. Was the first meeting.
And then the signups are out there for KXIC and DPO. There's
I
a
know,
sheet
I
out
saw
for
that.
that, so.
Okay,
Excellent.
anything else we need to cover? I'm gonna text JP and say, don't bother because we're done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
No, give me a second.
Oh, a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lori, those Mondays will work for you. Those Mondays work for you.
Talk over all y'all.
Monday's time.
Where do you go involved with redistricting? It's all good. Redistricting. It's all good. Redistricting. It's all good. Redistricting. It's all good. Redistricting. It's all good.